Skulls buried for years, a torso wrapped in carpet, trappers found dead under frozen water, tripwires set to impale hikers, bones pulled from the woods by a dog. These are disturbing discoveries found deep in forests. In April 2015, two brothers were walking through a forest in North Wales when they noticed something strange sticking out of the ground near a forest track. At first they thought it was an animal bone. When they looked closer though, they realized it was actually a human skull, partially buried in the soil. They called police and the area was immediately sealed off. As officers searched the surrounding forest, they found almost an entire human skeleton scattered nearby. The remains belonged to an adult male, believed to be between 35 and 65 years old. Forensics found that the body had likely been in the forest for at least a decade, possibly even longer, but they had no idea who he was. Investigators also found no obvious signs of trauma on the bones, so they couldn't determine how he died either. To this day, the man has never been identified. In October 1991, a 62-year-old man named Colin Oliver was walking home along a quiet lane near the village of Bolney in West Sussex, England, when he stopped to take a break off the side of the road. As he stepped into the nearby woods to relieve himself, he saw something that he would never forget. Torso wrapped up in a piece of carpet hidden in the undergrowth. That is the last thing you ever want to see when taking a leak. Anyway, he walked straight to the police station, reported it. When officers investigated the scene, they confirmed what he'd seen: a human torso, no head, no hands. One arm was cut above the elbow, the other below it. Police thought the limbs might have been taken off to hide tattoos or anything else that would make it easier for the remains to be identified. Months later, the remains were buried at a cemetery under the name Unknown Male, but that wasn't the end of the story. Decades later, in 2009, police exhumed the body and used newer forensic science to learn more. They now believe the victim was a well-built man between about 30 and 45 who'd likely spent at least some of the last year of his life in the UK or near the France-Germany border. Despite all that, no one's ever been identified or charged in connection with his death. His head and hands have never been found, and what exactly happened to this man before he was dumped in those woods and why remains a mystery more than 30 years later. In January 1924, three experienced fur trappers, Edward Nichols, Roy Wilson, and Dewey Morris, headed into the snowy woods of Deschutes National Forest in Oregon to spend the winter trapping animals for their pelts. They'd rented a remote log cabin near Little Lava Lake to live and work through the season. The last time anyone saw them alive was January 15th, when a fellow outdoorsman snowshoed over, stayed the night, and then left the next morning. He later told police the three were in good spirits the night before. After that, nobody heard from them again. Weeks went by with no word back in town. By April 1924, people got worried enough to mount a search. What they found at the cabin was eerie. Burnt food left on the stove, a table set for a meal, coats and firearms had been left behind. Out near Little Lava Lake, searchers noticed a patch of disturbed ice. When the thaw opened it up, the bodies of all three men bobbed up from under the surface. Each had been violently attacked and their bodies weighed down beneath the frozen water for months. As for who was responsible, sheriffs investigated, but no suspect was ever arrested or convicted. The case is still a total mystery. In April 2012, on a popular hiking route in Provo Canyon, Utah, something disturbing was hiding just a few hundred yards off the trail. A U.S. Forest Service law enforcement officer named James Shelfler was doing a routine foot patrol when he noticed a thin trip wire stretched across a path near a crude shelter built by hikers. When Shelfler followed the line of the wire, he found a booby trap straight out of Predator. One device was made with rope and fishing line connected to a 20-pound rock with sharpened sticks attached to it. Someone stepped on the tripwire, would swing down at roughly head or chest level. A second tripwire nearby was set so that a person walking in would fall forward onto a cluster of sharpened wooden stakes planted in the ground. Both traps were right at the entrance points of the shelter, the spot hapless hikers could easily have walked through. Luckily, Shelfler got here first. Being trained in recognizing dangerous devices from his military experience, he disarmed both traps before anyone was hurt. Police later tracked down two men, 19-year-old Benjamin Stephen Rotowski and 21-year-old Kai Matthew Christensen. They were arrested on suspicion of reckless endangerment. The men told police they set the traps to catch wildlife, like wild boars or rabbits, but police didn't buy the explanation. Plus, even if they were trying to hunt animals, Someone could have easily died. The traps were so close to a busy trailhead, just about a mile from where people start their hikes, so these guys were either malicious psychos or, at best, just total idiots. This next story comes from a now deleted Reddit user and goes as follows. I was hiking a rarely used trail in northern Ontario last spring. I go out a lot alone, mostly to hike and get away from the city. I noticed something off about the smell before I saw it. First I thought it was a dead deer, but as I got closer, I realized it was a partially skinned coyote pinned to a tree with wire. Someone had stretched it out, legs tied back, and left it hanging at eye level. Next to it were smaller bones scattered in a circle, ribs, paw bones, a skull that didn't match the coyote. I didn't linger. I backtracked to the main trail and have not been back since. In April 1978, a man and his brother were mushrooming in bushland beside Swamp Road near the town of Truro, South Australia, and they thought they saw a cow bone. When they looked closer, they realized it was attached to a shoe, and inside the shoe was human skin. Painted toenails. Police were called, and what followed was one of the most chilling series of discoveries in Australian bushland. Over the next year, police searched the area and found the skeletal remains of multiple women and girls. These remains belonged to several missing women who'd vanished from Adelaide in late 1976 and early 1977. Some of the remains were just bones scattered among clothing and personal items, far from any road or town, and they all led back to a man later identified as Christopher Robin Worrell and his accomplice, James Miller, who both had a very strange and complicated relationship. The two had met in prison and eventually began cruising around picking up women before ending their lives. James Miller apparently never actually touched any of the women himself, but he ended up being convicted and doing the time because Christopher Worrell died in a car crash before either of the men were ever caught. In August 1947, two potholers exploring a cave in North Yorkshire, England, discovered something laying under a pile of stones deep inside a narrow passage. After squeezing through a low entrance, they saw a pair of shoes and a human skeleton lying under a large rock. The bones were old, but some of the man's belongings were still there. There was a suit, a hat, matches, and some toiletries. Police couldn't figure out who the man was or how he ended up in the cave, but there was a bottle of sodium cyanide, a poisonous chemical, which meant the man may have taken his own life. Nobody reported a missing person that matched him, though, and over 70 years later, the identity of the skeleton is still a mystery. In 1974, a group calling themselves the North American Wildlife Research Team built something bizarre deep in the Rogue River Siskiyou National Forest in southern Oregon. They weren't hunting deer or mountain lions, they were trying to catch a Bigfoot. Using wood planks and heavy metal bands, they constructed what looked like a giant animal trap, about 10 feet long and 4 feet tall, anchored down with telephone poles and baited with carcasses. The idea was that if something big enough wandered in, the doors would drop and it would be caught inside. For 6 years, the trap sat out there, hundreds of yards from any road. They maintained it, checked it regularly, baited it with animal carcasses, but they never caught a Sasquatch. They did catch a couple bears, though. By the early 80s, the project was abandoned, but the trap sat there for decades. It was eventually moved to a hiking trail as this weird roadside attraction where it still sits today. In August 2024, a family in Jefferson County, Alabama started noticing their German Shepherd mix was bringing home human bones. The first time it happened, the dog came back from the nearby woods carrying what looked like a human skull. Tests later confirmed it belonged to an unidentified person. There was a bullet wound on the bone. Over the next several months, the dog returned with more pieces, parts of a leg, a jawbone, all of them dragged out of the surrounding woods. Police ran forensic tests, confirming all the bones came from the same person. They decided to put a tracking device on the dog to try and find where the remains were coming from, but it never located a source. As of the latest updates, investigators still haven't identified the victim or figured out where the bones came from. And finally, this Reddit user came across a mysterious list in the woods. This was last summer, they write. I was hiking alone on public land, went off trail to follow a creek. About 10 minutes in, I saw a piece of printer paper nailed to a tree at around shoulder height. It had been laminated. It was a list, about 20 lines long, with stuff like blue jacket, red backpack, dog, medium size, hiking poles, solo, couple, truck, white. Some items were crossed out, some weren't. Next to a few of them were dates written in pen. Recent dates within the last couple weeks. I stood there longer than I should have, trying to figure out what it could be for. There was also fresh nail holes below the paper, like older sheets had been put there and removed. I didn't take a photo, I wish I had, but at the time, it felt like a bad idea to pull my phone out and stand there any longer. I took a different way back and stayed on trail after that. Went back with a friend a week later, and the paper was gone. And that has been the video for today. I will catch you, yes you specifically, in the next one.